Hello, Tar Heel Nation. Welcome back to another UNC Hoops Talk podcast. This is the second one I'm doing this week, and that is because it's tournament time. It's March Madness, and also because I finally have a guest back on here. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you've seen him on here before. We got Blake from Keeping It Heel. Blake, how's it going? What have you been up to as far as writing for the Heels? Uh-oh, Blake, you still there? And of course, we got technical. We were just talking offline, and no technical difficulties. And of course, once we go live, something happens. Blake, you still there? All right. Hopefully, you guys will stay with us. I'm going to. All right, you there, Blake?
I'm back. We're back.
All right. Of course, I was telling the people, if there are people watching, we were talking and everything was good, and once I hit live, then you freeze up. But
Right.
Blake, it's good to have you back. How's it going? And tell us what you've been writing about the Heels and what's going on with you.
Yeah, man. Obviously, we've been writing a lot of basketball. It's been an up and down season. Everybody knows that. It's been well talked about. The good thing is that they're still playing. Live to die another day. That's what I wrote about tonight. So every day is literally the end of the season if they don't win. It's obviously been it's been rough for the fans, but as rough as it's been for the fans, it's been way worse for the players and the coaches. So we've been hanging in there. I'm still optimistic. I think next year is going to be phenomenal. I think having to play tomorrow is phenomenal because there's a chance to keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, we said it offline, but this team just looked completely different tonight, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But as far as the next loss being the next loss, it made me think like my kids are finally starting to, they're 5 and 7, and they're finally starting to cheer, actually cheer and watch. They're always watching me, cheer for them and talk about the Tar Heels and stuff. But I told them we're getting to the end of the season, and it's been a rough season for them to start in because they're going to start thinking they never win because they've been losing. They were losing so many this year. But I told them, hey guys, the next time they lose, they're done. And so they were into it cheering and they're with me. And I don't know if they fully get it, but it's awesome for that to happen. And then for tonight, titles was just going crazy because they were winning by so much, and we hadn't seen that this year. So let's talk about that first because we haven't had you on all season here. How did we get where we are? Obviously, we know injuries and stuff, but let's just kind of lay it all out there here. A little therapy for us tonight.
Sure, yeah. So obviously, at the start of the season, you've already lost Sterling Manley. He's never going to play at this point, it seems like. And it's really unfortunate because he's a guy that a couple of years ago I thought, he could be a starter on this team. He had a really strong close to his freshman season. He's a guy that I think is a talented guy, but unfortunately he's had a lot of bad breaks. And that has definitely hurt with depth in the front court. And then there's been problems there this year because, Armando Bacot has had growing pains. He's as good of an offensive rebounder as he is. He hasn't been consistent. And that's something that you can expect from a freshman, whether they're a 5-star player or not. The Sterling Manley thing obviously was painful to start the season. Anthony Harris, I think Anthony Harris played 5 or 6 games total. And that was after sitting out the first third of the season. He finally gets in there, boom, tears an ACL. He's out for the season. So that hurt with depth in the backcourt. The Cole Anthony injury, obviously being out for a number of games, that hurt the backcourt and that hurt the Tar Heels' ability to score. Now, some would argue that Cole Anthony being out sort of made the team maybe a more well-rounded offense, made them function and flow a little better because Anthony tends to take the air out of the ball a lot. But overall, when the team comes together and plays their best with Cole Anthony, and anybody that thinks otherwise is crazy. Because tonight you saw it, the last 5 games you've seen it. When this team is playing together, when they're playing cohesively, they're a pretty darn good team. And that's, pretty good for a team that's lost 80 plus games this season to injury. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, for any team, I guarantee you, take Duke this year and give them 80 games of injuries, a number of those to key players. And I guarantee you they're not sitting where they're at. Same thing for Kentucky, same thing for Gonzaga. So I'm not saying that this North Carolina team, 100% healthy, is a top 5 team. or a national title contender, because I don't think they are. I think there was merit to what Roy Williams said, whether it was ill-advised or not, when he said it's the least talented team he's had, because I do think they lack some of the talent and grit that past teams have had. However, if fully healthy, this team is certainly on the right side of the bubble. They're not sitting where they are. And even considering that, there's games that this team, as it stands, should have closed. And this team is 10 or 15 seconds away from being in the tournament, solidly in the tournament, because there's about 15 seconds worth of games where it's 6-7 wins.
And I was going to bring that up. There's a big tweet by Brian Ives, who does a lot of research for ESPN and stuff. And there's like 8 games where the other team has made the go-ahead bucket with, seconds
three seconds or less.
Right. And so you think, I don't even know, what is our record in the ACC right now? We're 6-14.
6-14.
You take, even if you don't say all those 8 games, you take, 5 of those games, and we're, 11-9
and a 5-game better record overall, and this team is in. If nothing else, because of name alone. And you'd be talking about tomorrow saying, okay, if they can beat Syracuse twice in a row.
Well, we wouldn't be playing tonight for first. We wouldn't be playing tonight.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, maybe tomorrow night we'd be playing our first game. We win one, and we're easily in for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
and you'd be talking about maybe winning a quarterfinal game to solidify, their NCAA tournament bid. As it is, it's win out. But they have lost a number of close games, and I can't say that they shouldn't have won it with the roster that it is. Now, if they would have been healthy and would have been a full healthy roster, I think they definitely would have won a lot of those games. But there's no excuse for some of those losses, no matter who you throw out there. You throw out 5 guys from the local YMCA, and you should have closed out those games.
Right.
Some of that, I think, was just bad finishing. Some of it was nerves. Some of it, honestly, was bad coaching. There was some bad end-of-game coaching. And it's just been an all-around down season. But having said all that, they're still here.
Yeah, and so and you said, I know, what if in there a few times, and there's a million what ifs we can do. But kind of where you started is, if Cole Anthony doesn't go out, do we find the chemistry? Because early on the season, even when he was playing, we did not look like we did tonight. I mean, Cole Anthony was shooting a lot of shots and missing a lot of shots. Brooks was not the player he is now. So in your opinion, if Cole doesn't miss that time, do we become the team? Maybe we have more wins. Maybe we're even in the tournament or on the bubble just because we get some of those wins without missing him. Sure. But are we as good as we look tonight?
It's hard to say. So what I can say is based on what we know. They weren't great at the beginning of the season. They seemed to get better when he was out. And that's no slight on him. I think it's because, number one, they were too reliant on him to start the season. Number two,
it's more on other guys than it is on him.
Number two, I think it is because he tends to be very, very ball dominant and has to let some of that go in this offense. He doesn't always have to be a pass first guard. We've seen in the past with very score heavy guards, guys like Ty Lawson, guys like Joel Berry. It can work. However, I think he was so on the scoring and dribbling and driving and penetrating and looking for his own shot side of things that hurt. What we do know is that when he came back, we didn't look very good. But now we can see that after several games back, this team seems to have found an identity. And that's what they were lacking the entire season. So I would like to think that if he hadn't missed those games, that they would have gotten to this point sooner. They maybe finished off a Duke game that they should have won. Other games that they should have won, bad conference losses. You'd like to think that if they were as good as they seemed the last 5 games or so, even with the loss to Duke, it was at Duke. Nobody expected a win, but they still competed. You'd like to think that they'd be sitting 4 or 5 games better than they are now, but we'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we'll never know. Who knows if Brooks becomes, gets the confidence that he has now without him out there, or what the chemistry is, and it's just mind-boggling to me. From the Virginia Tech game we played without B-Rob and without Cole, we take them to double overtime, and had our chances to win that game, and to tonight where we what do we win by 22 is just crazy to me, and disheartening, I know, to a lot of Tar Heel fans, but I've said on the podcast already this season, it makes us hopefully appreciate what North Carolina basketball is over our lifetimes, really. For a lot of fans, this be the first season like this they've had to go through. I remember 8-20 when I was in high school. I grew up in Minnesota, and there was no other Tar Heel fans, or maybe one or two other Tar Heel fans around, and everybody's, ragging on you. And it's like, take the shots while you can, because it's not going to happen again for a while. So we have to do it, but it's just so hard in the present to kind of realize that and to go through that, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I don't know anything else about the season leading up to the ACC tournament.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of spoiled North Carolina fans, and deservedly so. They've seen a lot of winning, and they've only seen, up to this point, they'd seen one bad season during the Roy Williams era, and that was 2010. And even that season was still a winning season. It was a season where if a couple things go right, they could have gotten into the NCAA tournament. This is one where it's the first one in the Roy Williams era where they literally have to win out to have any shot. So everything that could possibly go wrong this season has gone wrong. Injuries, mistakes, time management, closing out games, poor coaching at the end of games, everything that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong. Like Cole Anthony, that famous shot of him getting hit in the head and he's bleeding on the floor and he's like, I always get hurt. That's just like just how this season has been. Right when things start to look good, it's like, man, just something else. But like I said, I think the future's bright, and we're not even to the future yet. They've got one more game. So whether or not they can win 4 more games in 4 days, probably not. Vegas gave them a 1% chance. If I was crazy enough, I would have put $1,000 down on that, because I'd be rich if they somehow won it. But it is what it is. And next year they're going to come back. I think they'll be strong. I think they're going to have a fantastic showing from their freshman class, much better than this year. Assuming Garrison Brooks comes back and Armando Bacot comes back, you've got automatically a first-team All-ACC big man and Garrison Brooks, and a guy that should compete 1, 2, 3 for ACC Player of the Year. He's fantastic. And as good of an offensive player as he's become, he's an even better defensive player. And then Bacot, you've got to hope that maybe he gets a little bit stronger hands, a little better awareness, a little bit better footwork. But the offensive rebounding is already there on a very high level. He's an elite rebounder already. You add in a couple of guys like Day'Ron Sharp and Walker Kessler, and that's a terrific front court.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot there, and I don't want to get too far ahead. And we're going to have you in the off season and talk some more about that stuff. But let's move to tonight here. The big win, like we said, 22-point win over Virginia Tech. Completely different team as far as the eye test and what you see on the court and the product that we get. Obviously, Roy likes to say, everything looks better when the ball's going in the hoop and stuff, which is happening now. But there's so much more to it, I think, than just making shots. It's definitely a big part of it. We know, we saw the struggles of the team trying to score early in the season and throughout the season. It's been a long time ago, but we had droughts of 17 minutes, 11 minutes where we couldn't make a bucket. So that's definitely a big part of it. But what else is there to just the way this, we talked about the chemistry as well, but just the way this team looked tonight, it looked like North Carolina basketball compared to a lot of what we've seen this season.
And Roy Williams is right. It always looks better when the shots are falling. What I will say is that this team somehow through all of this has remained confident, and credit to them. As bad as they've been at the end of games and games that they certainly should have won and didn't, they have remained confident. And I credit to them for doing that, because it has been a historically bad season.
Yeah, there's not many people that wouldn't have given up. No,
and they looked confident tonight. They've looked confident over the last couple of weeks. And that's sort of what's brought on this winning of late, and with that confidence, I think they've got a trust among each other, and they trust each other, and they're passing better. They're running better offense. You saw tonight multiple times the pick and roll working, the backdoor cut from Anthony to Garrison Brooks for a wide open dunk. Those plays weren't happening, a few weeks back, and that's not just because Virginia Tech is a horrible defensive team. North Carolina is playing better offense. They're playing more poised. They're playing more, with more intensity. They're playing confident, and I think something finally clicked. And that wasn't clicking earlier in the season. And I think it has to do with all those intangibles, but I also think it has to do with just the shots going down. I mean, look how good Christian Keeling has been the second half of the season. He couldn't hit, the ocean, in the first half of the season. And the second half of the season, he's been fantastic. And when you've got him hitting shots, off the bench or as a starter, whichever, way he's playing, from just inside the three, he's really spaced the floor out more. You got Robinson doing the same thing when he's hitting threes tonight. He was 5 of 6. And Anthony has been more selective shooting threes, and he's been better hitting threes instead of just throwing up prayers every time down the court. And then Garrison Brooks has been as consistent as anyone could possibly be. Just a great scorer inside. He's got a nice jump shot for mid range. This team looks like a team that should be in the tournament. Now, obviously, they're not right now, but tonight I think that team can compete with most teams.
Yeah, so, and we have to mention, too, Virginia Tech, we kind of knew coming in, they were going to shoot a lot of threes. I don't remember how many they hit in the first game in that double overtime one. I know they shot like 37, and it was a little over half of their shots from the three-point line in the first half. Tonight they shot 36 again out of 62 shots were threes, but only made 10 tonight. And you could kind of tell in the first half, they made a few and went on a run, gave us got a close. Made it still a game at halftime, and then when those shots aren't going down consistently for them, it's a different Virginia Tech team as well. We got to look at it from that side as well. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
They were a much better team in the first meeting, and certainly if they don't shoot 29% tonight from 3-point range, it's probably a different game. I don't think that changes things unless they hit an exorbitant amount of threes. But even if they hit 15, 16, 17 threes, I don't think it changes this game to the degree that it changes the winner. Yeah, okay. But certainly they are a team that is going to oftentimes win or die by that long distance shot. And tonight they weren't falling.
All right, so let's move ahead, look into the rest of this ACC tournament. Before we do got some people watching here. Joey Mullins is from Kentucky and the only UNC fan there, so he felt me growing up in Minnesota. I bet Kentucky's a lot worse though than Minnesota if you're a Tar Heel fan. We got Grant Bowden here. It says 1 down, 4 to go. I know you kind of alluded to it, but you said we got one more game instead of saying we got 4 more games to go. We got to take it game by game. And I seeing a lot of the quotes from the guys coming into tonight was kind of the same thing. We have 1 game left. Not thinking too far ahead, because you don't get there. Those don't mean anything anyway. So as far as looking ahead to tomorrow night against Syracuse, we got Lifter Fitness, who is a regular listener and watcher of the podcast, says Cole needs to get his offensive shooting back for Syracuse. As long as he's playing good along with Brooks and Baycott plus B-Rob staying consistent, we can win this tournament. Again, not even looking so much at the tournament. Let's start with tomorrow night against Syracuse. We've had a lot of success breaking down the Syracuse zone. Not even this team. Obviously, we did a good job of it when we played them late in the season. But even going back to other Roy Williams teams, he just seems to know how to break down the zone. And it's not just chucking threes and hitting threes. He knows how to break down this zone, right?
Well, absolutely, yeah. They were really good against Boeheim's zone the last time out. I'm just looking at the stats. They hit 33 of 64 shots for the game, and they hit 11 three-pointers in that game and shot 42% from 3. They were very good. They out-rebounded Syracuse. If they can do those two things again, and I know it's it's easy to say that if they can shoot well and they can rebound, they're going to win. But even if they screw up everything else, if they can out-rebound Syracuse tomorrow and they can just hit a fair amount of threes, break up that zone, get Syracuse playing from behind early, I like them winning the game. Yeah,
and I think this goes without. This is every team and every game, but obviously foul trouble, and like you said, rebounding. Going back to even that second matchup with Duke, we started really pounding it inside and taking it to their big guys, and our big guys were winning that battle until Armando Baycott got his 4th foul, and then the game changes when Justin Pierce comes in just because of lack of size. So that's definitely something to. And tonight was a different game with Virginia Tech shooting a lot of threes, and the physicality wasn't there, and so the foul trouble wasn't there. And then when we pulled away, obviously foul trouble never became an issue. But it is something to watch. When we rely on rebounding so much. But let's talk to. He says Cole needs to get his shooting form back, or get his offensive shooting back. Tonight he only had 10 points. shot 3 for 10 from the field. We don't expect that to happen again, but is it that important? Is Cole kind of what's going to start this team?
I think it's important for him to not be horrible. I don't think it's this all-important thing that he's putting down 26, 27 points. I don't think he has to every night. I think tomorrow night North Carolina can win with just everybody doing okay. The thing is, if Cole shoots poorly and they shut down Garrison Brooks, then it's going to be a really tough game. But if you've got a guy like Brandon Robinson giving you 17, most of which came from the perimeter, Brooks owning the inside, Baycott giving you 11, 12 rebounds tonight. I think it was 11 rebounds and 12 points. Yep. That's a well-rounded game from this team. And as long as Anthony's facilitating the ball okay, maybe scoring a little bit, I'd like to see him drive a little bit more, get to the foul line a little bit more, not rely on that shooting if it's not going down. Drive a little bit more. Get to the foul line. He's a good free throw shooter. He can hit free throws. So I don't know that tomorrow it's that important for him to be fantastic. Now, if he is, that's only going to make them more potent. But relying on him, I think, earlier in the season is part of what got them in trouble.
Yeah, that Notre Dame game to start the season may have been one of the worst things that could have happened to this team. And, we talked about how the other guys just didn't know how to play with him. And I think that Notre Dame game where he just went off was a little bit of our detriment early in the season. And B-Rob, obviously he shot the ball so well tonight. The crossover 3 and a couple other threes, he was obviously feeling it. And you can kind of see that he doesn't want to end his senior season and his career on a really down negative note. And he's going to give everything he's got. Keeling only played 8 minutes tonight. So there's another guy that can definitely spread that zone out and knock down some shots in there. We definitely have the mix of guys to spread out that zone and attack it. And I think we know what we have to do tomorrow night. It's just whether they come out and execute and keep rebounding, stay out of foul trouble and all that kind of stuff. What about Syracuse? Is there anything that kind of scares you from them offensively? They had a first team ACC a member in Hughes, who's the leading scorer in the conference. Again, didn't look great against us, but and I don't know if you've seen him any more than that this season. I haven't seen a lot of their games, but anything scary going into tomorrow night from Syracuse?
I'm really not that afraid of a Syracuse team that hasn't been all that great this season. They've had highs and lows, but more lows than highs, really. It's another team that Jim Boeheim, I think, probably should have in the tournament, but just overall hasn't closed out games. I mean, they've done some of the same things that North Carolina has. And I mean, honestly, losing a game to North Carolina by 13 points on your home court, it's going to go down as a bad loss. And there's games that they should have capitalized on that they certainly didn't. Now, Boeheim's got a history of either bad luck or bad whatever juju at Greensboro Coliseum. So I don't know that anybody expects Syracuse to win even because of that. So I'm not really afraid of any one player that much. I think North Carolina's got the firepower and the guys, the bodies to match up well enough with Syracuse. I think it's just going to come down. An interesting thing is that this game was really spent a lot of it at the free throw line the first time around. There was, I believe they shot 36 combined free throws the first game. And it was one of the few games where North Carolina hit most of their free throws. That's another piece of this game that could be very important. I think they combined for like 37 fouls, in that game. And if this game is played at the free throw line tomorrow and North Carolina can hit, 90% of their free throws, probably sitting pretty good, especially if they can win that rebounding battle. If it's one of those games where they hit, 10 of 28, I don't know.
Yeah. And free throws, the thing we haven't talked about, obviously we knew the struggles going throughout the season and, missing late, closing out some of those games. Garrison Brooks had a few games at the stretch in there where he was horrendous from the free throw line, but it's also something that hasn't been talked about a lot is how we've turned that around. Tonight we were 19 for 25 from the free throw line. So maybe because the pressure is not there, I don't know. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. We're going to predict how far we think North Carolina is going this tournament. We're not even going to worry about who wins the ACC tournament. Where do we slip up? Can we get 5 games in 5 days? I'm going to put you on the spot. But as you think about that here, we got a few other comments here Joey Mullins says he gets heat all the time from being in Kentucky and being a Carolina fan.
Man, Joey probably gets trash from Cardinal fans and Wildcat fans. It's got to be tough being in that state.
And those are some bad fan bases to get heat from. So he also says, "Go Heels, love your content." He talked about free throws here. Free throws are very, very key for sure. And then we also had Jordan T join us in here and said he's from the Flick Chat, which is a new group chatting app, which I have a group on there related to the podcast and all Carolina fans on there. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're watching and listening to this and you want to join us on the Flick Chat to just chat about Carolina college basketball, whatever it is, we're going to keep going even after the Tar Heels are done. But definitely let me know if you want to join that. So enough stalling here, Blake. And I don't know, I'll go first if you want me to. But what do you see the Tar Heels doing here the rest of the ACC tournament?
I think it's a dangerous thing when you're playing with okay, they don't have nothing to lose, but there shouldn't be a ton of pressure on them from a standpoint of it's been a really bad season. No one is expecting anything from them, right? So you're playing loose. They seem to be shooting better. They're playing with confidence. I think that's a dangerous thing in a tournament like this where, teams can often sort of, underestimate a lower seeded team, especially, the team that was worst in the conference. If I'm throwing down a whole bunch of money on it, I'm going to say that they lose to Louisville. My hope is that they continue shooting and playing the way that they are. And if they do, Louisville's a very beatable team. We've seen it on a number of occasions this year. They're a good team, but they are certainly a team that's susceptible to a very good shooting night by a team like North Carolina, that if they get hot, if Cole's hitting shots from the outside, if Brandon Robinson's hitting shots, if Keeling is hitting that mid-range jumper, and if Garrison Brooks and Armando Bacot are hitting shots inside 10 feet and pulling down 15, 20 boards between them, they could beat a Louisville team. So I hate to say it, but I think they probably lose to Louisville. But certainly, if they play the way they did tonight and the way they had the last couple of weeks, I think it's a toss-up.
What's your prediction? You're sticking with they're losing to Louisville?
I'll stick with it, and if I have to, put my foot in my mouth later, then I'll certainly do that.
All right, my prediction. I'm the same way. It would be so easy on 3 games in 3 days for them to lose to a very good Louisville team there. We talked about Louisville doesn't really have much to gain, to play for. They're in the tournament. They're in pretty easily. Obviously, there's some seeding that could change, if they won the tournament or something like that. So I'm going to say we beat Louisville, and we're going to lose to Virginia in the semis. We're going to get close. I just think Louisville and Virginia are kind of the 2 worst matchups for us. I would almost rather see Florida State Duke. We played them, all 3 games that we had against those 2 teams this year. We played, pretty tight, and we weren't even playing as well as we were now. I think I'd rather see those 2 teams than Louisville and Virginia. So I'm going to say we beat Louisville on, what day would that be? Thursday, yeah. And then we lose to Virginia in the semis on Friday. That's my prediction. And again, I'm with you. We could easily lose to Louisville on Wednesday, but we gotta win tomorrow night first. I know this matters. So we're gonna obviously stick with our heels and go through the rest of this season as far as we can. Be ready for next season. And I said on the last podcast I want to try to keep doing these live chats, and they'll go up to audio podcast as well. But as long as the Tar Heels are playing, I want to try to do these every night. Blake, you're welcome to come back on if you want to. Tomorrow night, if we win, if we lose, it may not be worth. We may not want to talk about it. But, as long as we keep winning, we may. And so we'll talk about that and see if you want to come back on. But I think that's about all we got. Blake, you got anything to close us off on?
I mean, I'm happy to come back anytime, but we're going to have to extend this to football season because football is getting crazy in Chapel Hill.
It really is.
The off season has been amazing.
This is the UNC Hoops Talk podcast, but we can maybe throw some football in there while you're on. I'm not into it as much, and so it doesn't make me look smart, so I don't talk about it. But
That's different what you know. You're a smart man.
Yeah, there you go. So Blake, thanks for coming on. Make sure everybody go follow him. If you're watching, his Twitter is right there, but otherwise it's in the description. It's Blake KCMO. Go follow him. Let's unite Tar Heel Nation and let's keep this run going strong. That is all we got for you guys tonight. Until next time, go Heels.